Hello, my name is Tolg and I exist, therefore I think too much. I am overwhelmed with the amount of caffeine I drank. What am I? I am reading from Marguerite Poret's The Mirror of Simple Souls. I finished on chapter 46, so I'll attempt to get through 30 minutes worth of work, but I've been doing really short on these as of recent, so I'll attempt 2 chapters. I rant while I read. It is not a perfect read-through, and I cuss when I talk. So these are your warnings for my person. House rules, arguments, not fights. I absolutely stand to be corrected on certain things here and there because no one can be right 100% of the time, just logic, and I'm uneducated. There's that. My attempt to learn comes from being undereducated, and if you find something worth correcting or you want to challenge an idea, I implore you to do so. That's how everyone learns, is they fucking communicate. The only intention I have of laying down house rules is that there is a definitive difference between fighting and arguing. Don't be nasty just to be nasty. If you're a nasty person, that's entirely a separate thing. But don't be nasty just because you want the result of someone feeling how nasty you are. That sucks. Don't suck. So chapter 4, she also writes in conversational style between the entities being discussed. Chapter 47. Title of which, How the Soul Has Arrived at Understanding of Her Nothingness. I'm pretty sure the last video I made, I discussed how I don't agree with this. But it is such a grandiose idea, it's hard to land on agree or disagree, because contemplating everything and nothing simultaneously is so far beyond the finite human existence, it is difficult to do. But this is my attempt. So love speaks first. Now you have heard how the soul has arrived at belief in the greater part. I think I justified that by saying that the goodness of love's goodness exists both in nothing and everything, and if you combine that love's goodness in nothing and the love's goodness in everything, and the ownership of goodness by love in everything, then that would be equal to the greater part. I still stand on not believing it to be greater than the greater part. Although part is also difficult because I guess she may be looking at it from the sentiment that it is not necessarily perfectly balanced, but that one may be more substantiated than another, have more quantity or quality, whichever, or both, to it than another, at which point that may be the thing that I take issue with. I personally believe balance needs to exist if existence is to be had. Thus, she understands that neither she nor any other understands the nothingness of her horrible sins and faults. That would be a good way to wash anything you've ever done. It's incredibly forgiving a notion to understand that nothing exists in everything, and thus anything you contemplate has a bit of nothing in it. So the sins you have committed have a part of that nothing in that sin you committed. Which gives a whole other meaning to, it's nothing. What did you just do? It's nothing. You know, on some level, it is nothing. But on another level, it could be someone else's subjective everything. Nuance. And while they may not understand the nothingness of her horrible sins, they may understand the everythingness of her horrible sins. Writing someone off for that part that they don't understand is simultaneously, I believe, writing them off for the part that they do understand. Which at that point, your interaction with other people and how you move through life has been organized that you are just essentially wanting no one to exist, which I can understand. It makes things easier if you're the only one in existence, but there's not an easy word I can put to it. Selfish is the one that would be most utilized, but I think it's not selfish, it's fear driven. Again, can't control, so do away with it. They can't understand the nothingness of sins and faults compared to what is in the knowledge of God about them. Well, duh. Like, they know nothing in comparison to what God knows. What's the point of saying that? What's the point of saying that? If God is everything, then these people are a part of that everything. So what they know matters at least somewhat. It may not be as important as knowing the whole of everything, but it's not unimportant entirely. Such a soul, says Love, has retained no will, because they don't exist, but instead has arrived at and fallen into willing nothing, and the certain knowledge of knowing nothing. And this knowing nothing and willing nothing have released and freed her, as it would. Such a soul, says Love, maintains the counsel of the gospel, which I believe was said to be the role of the Holy Church. They'll talk at the soul who has already annihilated itself, and that was their sentiment by which they ought to exist. While they cannot be this rare annihilated soul, they can still be important in their existing by reiterating the gospel and corralling the soul in the direction it ought to go while it wills nothing. There's a very complicated picture, but I think it was a Hail Mary of, I'm not getting rid of your importance entirely, Holy Church. While I may not need a mediator, you can still perform the mediation between me and God. Is very weak reason to exist. Which again leads to understanding the heresy within this work and why she was burned at the stake. So the Holy Church discusses the gospel to the annihilated soul, of which it says, have a simple eye and then you will not sin. And the simple eye is understood to be willing nothing. That is beyond simplistic. I was reading back to Marcus Aurelius, the Meditations of, and I think he was insulting Stoicism, while he himself is a Stoic. But it was the sentiment that, exactly that sentiment, what feels better than doing the least in life or something like that. Is the safest, what is safest, or what feels better than doing the bare minimum, and one ought therein to do the bare minimum, which essentially means limit your actions and limit your words, be more observant, because in this being observant, you have the ability to be more accurate in what it is you do, and doing more and saying more leads to more inaccuracy, which is logical thinking. However, Marcus Aurelius comes back with, yeah, that makes sense, but in it making sense, wouldn't it make more sense to say that one, instead of doing less, should do what is most necessary? Because in doing what is most necessary, they are thusly limiting their actions to only what is necessary and taking out what is unnecessary. So yes, you can do less, but that doesn't mean you're automatically doing what is necessary. You may be doing less, but you may be only doing what is unnecessary in doing less. And I feel like that sentiment is incredibly applicable to this, where have a simple eye and then you will not sin. Just doing less doesn't mean that you're going to be in the right, but doing only what is necessary automatically means that you are doing less, and that puts you in acting towards what is ultimately and objectively good. It goes on from there and it says, so this soul is at peace in all that God suffers from her. Whoa, she's so powerful she can make God suffer. For she has true intention in all her undertakings, and peaceful repose in the actions of her neighbors. I guess you could look at that akin to how a child makes a parent suffer, because again, one would have to view it from being a finite, limited human, in that our understanding is not that of God. And while a child can make a parent suffer, that is only if the parent so chooses. It's still within their power to decide, and the majority of the time that they are suffering because of the child, it is out of their love towards this child. It isn't that the child has incredible power, that they rule over the house with an iron fist, but it is an allowance granted to them through this love. And that effect on the parent is, again, through this love for the child. And so this would be saying, even though she fucks up, she's trying not to fuck up. And so this parent, this God, can understand the reason rather than the end result. So as much as it may have a negative effect on everything being God, the intention being good, allowing for more learning, results in that part of fucking up being only a moment in this grand picture of everything. And in learning, one can correct that. And in God existing as everything, in all of time, all at the same time, that would mean that this fuck up of a moment is standing alongside all of the gains of any moment ever. So as much as it matters, it does not matter. The end result will always be the same. Although I'm not sure she's at peace with the actions of her neighbors. Well, one would have to be, because even though you are a part of everything, you are not everything in and of yourself. And in acknowledging and understanding that, you would get to a point of knowing that you cannot control others. You only have control over the life you were given. So the aim should be to do what is most necessary by what you are capable of affecting. And past that, allowing for grace towards your own person and towards others. And acceptance. And simultaneously, that you are not... What's that one phrase? It's often taken out of context. Where God says, do not say my name in vain. Vanity indicates a hyperbole. Egotism blown out of proportion. And hyper self-centered. So do not take my name in vain is essentially saying, do not act as though what you are doing is in my name. That I told you to do it as God. That God told you to do it. That God would have had you do it. Or that you are doing anything for God, for everything. When what you are doing is vanity, is egotism, is self-serving. And so, you see the world and you have the ability to assess and use deductive reasoning for why things are, but acting in a position as though you have the ability to control others is taking God's name in vain. You are assuming that you are thus everything, that you have the capacity to control others. The only one with the capacity to control others is everything. You have promoted yourself to the position of God. That is, what is that called? You are heresy, heretical. You are, that is extreme blaspheme. And the next sentence, I think, goes in line with what I just said. For in everything about which she has intention, she makes no judgment except that it is always in goodness. And my personal belief is that the word goodness is synonymous and can therein be replaced with the word necessary. That it is always in an attempt towards what is necessary. And so the judgment cast on herself or on others is this necessary? Is this not necessary? And the actions taken therein are what to do about what is unnecessary versus what to do about what is necessary. And then how you act towards that would be, what can I do? What do I have the ability to do about this unnecessary or necessary thing? And in line with also simultaneously what is necessary, to overstate the word. This soul has her peace in all places, for she carries peace with her always, so that because of such peace all places are comfortable for her, and all things also. Thus such a soul seats herself without moving herself on the throne of peace in the book of life, in the witness of a good conscience, and in freeness of perfect charity. For those who are not coming up under biblical Christianity, the book of life is essentially, I think it's St. Peter, who is supposed to be situated outside the gates of heaven, reading from a book in which is transcribed all of life, everything that has ever happened in life. And so it is said in this part of this mythology that those who would go to the gates of heaven are thusly judged by everything they have ever done in life, transcribed in this book of life. And within this book of life is said to be recorded already, because God exists everywhere all the time, as God is everything, that in this book of life there's preordained recording of those who are admitted, those who did what is necessary, those who will, quote unquote, go to heaven, or the equivalent of Valhalla, or have reached nirvana. At which point my understanding of Christianity has kind of been like, give up. But not in how giving up is understood. But if you're constantly striving for the end goal being a part of heaven, what is recorded in the book of life is already recorded in the book of life. So you shouldn't make an end goal of being granted something that you understand to be positive. Your goals should be had in the momentary of do what is necessary. You are not the judge. You don't get to dictate, and you don't get to know until the moment comes. So what use is it to worry about what you have no control over, whether you go into heaven or not? The only thing that you have control over is your own actions in the moment. So you should be doing what you can do to do what is objectively necessary for everything, for God. And that's what I think is meant by she sits in peace where the book of life is concerned. And if you are truly acting in accordance with everything, in want of what is necessary for everything, then it wouldn't fucking matter whether you were condemned or glorified, as your only goal would be to do what is necessary. And your goals are oriented in lieu of what you desire for everything else, rather than what you desire for self. And therein is good conscience, and in freeness of perfect charity. That would be perfect charity. You are not self-driven. You are driven for everything. Chapter 48 has the title, How the Soul is Not Free, who desires that the will of God be done in her and to her honor. That would be self-driven. If you get honor, so be it. If you don't get honor, so be it. What you get is what is necessary for everything. That would be being free. Without that, you are shackled to your expectations that are entirely self-driven again. So love starts talking. Thus the soul wills nothing, says love, since she is free. For one is not free who wills something by the will within him, whatever he might will. For when one is a servant of oneself, one wills that God accomplish his will to one's own honor. The one who wills this only wills that the will of God be accomplished in him and in another. So that would be, may I do right so that I can end up in heaven. Rather than, I hope, I am going to assess and deduce what is necessary in the situation so that I am doing what is good, what is necessary by everything, whatever the end result is. One is, I want to do what others judge as right, what I am told is right, because it's not able to deduce. It is upholding a standard so that it evades immediate judgment and questioning. It is perceived freeness in the moment rather than absolute freeness in everything. To such a one, says love, God refuses his kingdom. Reason responds, without doubt, says reason, thus they would do. The soul is now talking indeed, so they would do this. Truly, says the soul, they must do this, or they would lose what little they possess in the moment. As I assume the attempt to aim for heaven would be an attempt for absolute comfort, as heaven is perceived as perfection. So if your aim is comfort, would you not be aiming for that in your current disposition? You would not therein be aiming for what is necessary, what is good. Though there is this song I sing when I am way too anxious in order to comfort myself, and it's I apologize, I can only sing it to remember the lyrics. On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. How I love that old cross, where the dearest and best, where a world of lost sinners was slain. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown. Is essentially this sentiment entirely. And it's also the opposite of what I'm saying, that you would cling to comfort. It's like, I'll accept whatever torture comes to me because that is in line with what Jesus sacrificed, and thus it must be holy. There's also a sentiment of, if I'm getting attacked, then I'm doing something right. And I'll exchange this torture at the end for being glorified, when it's still putting you in a position of not assessing the situation and not properly judging it. Do you need to be going through that torture? Is that torture necessary for your growth, for someone else's growth? or is it unnecessary? Because there is a phenomena where when you believe, as someone who's been abused, when you believe that you deserve to be tortured or that you're going through this torture because pointing out that you are being tortured is going to hurt the person torturing you, you can do more harm than what you need to be doing, than you can do good. You can further this person sending themselves into their own hell. By allowing them to continue torturing you, you are allowing them to continue to sin against you. And in that situation, it's best to either point out what is happening or remove yourself entirely so that you are stopping them from continuing selling themselves as the least of what they can be. If you honestly aim for what is necessary and you honestly loved this person, you would want them to grow past their fear, their thought that they need to hurt you to get what they want. And if you honestly loved God and understood that everything is a part of God, you would want this part of God that is committing the torture to not be sold as the least part of what they are. It goes on, love, or Reason says, "It is true, Lady Soul," says Reason, "I confess it to you." Love responds, "Such folks," says Love, "are not calm, no matter how much they think they are. And because of such opinion, their state is sufficient for them." In that, there is something I've also gone through where by making fear apparent in the environment, it makes the individual feel self-assured. Either in that they feel important or that they are doing enough to avoid the lack of feeling safe or feeling important. So this anxiety caused onto others and experienced by themselves would promote them into a position of not only is this deserved, but it must be deserved because I'm doing enough and everybody else just isn't in line with doing this much. Or even if there isn't thought applied, because there's so much going on. At the point that there's so much going on, this high adrenaline would make it so that you don't have to think about what you ought to be doing, what needs to be done. And in that, it can cause more fear when you don't have this state of panic, this state of adrenaline moving you. This loss of control, this sitting still and observing. And that is an incredible point of a lack of freedom, a lack of peace therein. And their state is sufficient for them because, they don't have to think about everyone else, about everything else. They sold themselves low. Soul responds, "They do not have as much worthiness," says the soul, "as to think there is no one greater than they." Whoa. As much worthiness as... They do not have as much worthiness as to think there is no one greater than themselves. They are not worthy enough to contemplate anybody being more worthy than they are. Ouch. Oof. Ouch. Heartbreaking. When in just general society you meet someone with more talent, more skill, more empathy or capacity to do things than yourself, and instead of appreciation, it causes shame. It's heartbreaking. Not only, I've been on either side due to societal expectations and selling myself on societal expectations rather than self-love. And I think that's what ends up with jealousy and this obsessive hatred of others is the incapacity to accept that someone's purpose in life would put them in a position of needing these traits And society would judge them as better than you for having these traits, but that does not make you less worthy. What makes you less worthy is denying them their intrinsic value and proposing yours over anyone else's, promoting yourself before anybody else. It would be difficult to assess your worth if all you do is scream at people that you are worthy. Not necessarily exactly scream, but maybe metaphorically. Because at that point, all your time is taken up in defending yourself, which I'm currently struggling with. I feel like I have not been able to develop because I'm stuck in defense. And I'm stuck in defense because I'm living up to a societal mode of expectation. So I don't have peace. As much as I may aim for objective logic and aim to work for everything, I still feel like the subjective nuance of society matters. Because I'm afraid of the wounds caused by the judgment. And I guess if I trusted everything, I wouldn't fear. And I guess that's my issue, is I don't trust anything. I don't know how to work on that. If you could leave a comment telling me how, cool. Soul responds to itself and says, certainly not, says this soul, since will remains in them, they are servants. Oh no, love responds, my bad. They will never be satisfied, such folks, says love. And then soul responds to that and says, certainly not, says this soul. Since will remains in them, they are servants of their will. A soul enters such servitude, says this soul, who believes completely these two virtues, that is, reason and fear, and this insatiable will. But the one alone is free, says this unencumbered soul, whom faith and love govern. For they remove such a one from all servitude, without fear of frightening things, without desire of delectable things. Maybe that's something I'll work on. Because I guess I am working on reason and fear. And I am desiring that I am doing what is right. Well, okay, self-growth is needed. And I am over 30 minutes. Alrighty, so, ta-da! May your wants align with your needs. And may you be granted the resources needed in order to do what it is that you need to do by that which is everything. Oh, he's cute. Good night.